here. Biotech is a nonprofit that works with all of the community colleges, all of the K through 12 school districts, and all of the ROPs to help introduce students like all of our registrants to potential career opportunities and help them to find their dream careers. What I would like to do is encourage our students to pose any questions that they have in the Q&A. We actually have it set up so that you can do upvotes and downvotes as well. And so by the end, when we get to the end of this, if we have any questions that haven't been covered that are posted in there, we'll make sure that we can highlight those. Without further ado, we'll get started on the questions. I have some prepared questions that primarily were sent in by the students, which is really great. Traditionally on panels like this that we do, you know, Vitalink comes up with the questions, but I think we got a lot of really great questions from the students. And so I thought we would delve into those to begin. So the first one that came up, and I really loved this one, it's a little bit long, and so I'll read it, and then if anybody wants to tackle pieces of it, they can. So the student asked, what are the requirements to get into the industry? Because it feels like a degree sometimes is not enough. Most employers want experience, yet we can't get experience if no one will give us a chance. I know a creative resume is a start, but what else can we do to improve our chances? Because even internships are difficult to obtain.
It's a good question. When I started clinical research about 15 years ago, it wasn't that hard to get into the industry. It ended up that the more popular the industry became, the more competitive it became. Institutions, academic institutions started having clinical research specific degrees. Before that, a lot of people were falling into the industry just by chance. Maybe they sought out medical school, something else, and learned about clinical research and then fell into it in that way. A lot of it is going to come together, the creative resumes, the internships, but also I encourage people to seek out mentors. And it's a good opportunity for that. I myself, for example, do a whole lot of mentoring, try to get people over that hump. And sometimes it really requires having somebody vouch for you, work, develop you, and get you through the door. You can apply online all day long, but sometimes it really does. It takes somebody saying, I know this person, I've interacted with this person. And I realize what I'm saying, and sometimes that's a very discouraging notion. The fact that doing the education, putting in the work, isn't the only thing that should determine your success. But unfortunately, with the industry being so competitive, that's the case. Now, one thing that you can do in this area of COVID-19 is a little bit harder. But there are some hotbeds of research where the competition is severe. The Bay Area, for example, Boston, Seattle, New York. There's a lot of research companies there, and there's a lot of people living there that are doing those research jobs. So one avenue that you can take is to pursue jobs in areas where the competition is not as high. For example, Dallas or San Antonio, where there's a clinical research market where there are sponsor companies or CROs that don't have that hotbed of competition that we have in the Bay Area, for example.
I broke into the industry by chance. And so my advice to every student would be, go ahead and do a search for the job. And even if it says that it requires industry experience, apply even if you don't have industry experience, because you never know if the hiring manager sees that you have other skills and just brings you in for an interview. And I would first start out with trying to obtain an employment at a clinical research organization, which they're called CROs. You can Google them, and then go on the actual CRO website and just apply even if there aren't job openings, because sometimes they do have some internships or other opportunities that you might not be aware of. It's honestly a statistics game too. The more you apply, the increases your chances. It is a little bit more difficult to get into the pharmaceutical companies. They do want, big pharma would like to have industry experience, but usually I found that with the CROs, they're more easily accessible to new candidates breaking into the industry.
I got into industry also by chance. It wasn't a purposeful decision. And the best way to have those kinds of happy accidents happen is to say yes to opportunities and not try to force something and figure that there's only one way to get to where you want to be. You know, getting started is the key. and waiting around for that perfect opportunity will delay the getting started. And the other thing that I would say is I am very skeptical of the phrase creative resume. And people should be very cautious of getting too creative with their resumes. The purpose of the resume is to get an interview, and if you are very creative, it can hide all of your good experience under some things that aren't going to be as attractive to a hiring manager. So,
okay, great advice.
It's interesting because when you said biotechnology as the panel, I mean, it could have been anything. It could have been finance, could have been administration, could have been marketing, could have been sales. But it's good to see that actually everybody here, including me, has come to clinical research from different areas. And I bet you if I found out what you all said that you came from, we're all different. And I think that's the funny thing about clinical research. It's kind of under the radar. It doesn't seem like an industry, but it actually is an industry. And you can get there for many different ways, which a lot of industries aren't like that.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to Vance's point, because I think he makes a good one. In my time, 15, 16 years of doing this, I've known people to be in this industry that have gone on to project management, associate director, director level positions. They came into the industry with journalism degrees, humanities degrees, social economics degrees. Jumped into this industry from a lot of different ways. Now, of course, the more streamlined approach would be something that's biological, medical related and go that route. But to his point, yeah, you can come from a lot of different industries and still survive in this industry. It just really it's determined by how aggressive you want to be in managing that learning curve. But a lot of people do it. They do it every day and they're successful at it. Okay,
wonderful. Yeah, I think, you know, for Vitalink and a lot of the events that we do, one of the things that we discover is that there aren't necessarily linear paths into occupations. There's not one set thing. And so thank you for bringing that out. One of the questions that came out that I really loved, which I think will be, you know, kind of more focused on each of you individually, is what does your day look like in the job? I think students, you know, can kind of have an idea, but a lot of times, you know, those ideas are shaped by media, you know, television, what they see on YouTube, things like that. And so they want to hear from you. What is your day? What does a day look like in your job?
So it really depends on what level of the game you're playing. For example, and I'll give you an example. Ashley mentioned CROs, contract research organizations, where they usually have clinical research associates. You have the in-house version, and then you have the people that go into the field, that go to the hospitals, the clinics, that actively monitor study. So when I was doing that job, my day looked like hopping on a plane and going to a clinic almost every day of the week. I was what they called a road warrior, 80, 95% travel, never at home. And there's some benefits to that. You rack up the frequent miles, you rack up the hotel miles, you rack up the car rentals, but you're never at home. Move on to more of the in-house jobs. Even still, our day is such that we spend a lot of time sometimes in front of a computer working on documents, liaising with different collaborators on our projects. But in this industry, especially if you decide to go into a company where you're doing global work, 8 to 5 doesn't usually exist in this industry. Especially if you're doing global projects, it ends up being that your days tend to be a little bit longer. What I tell people when I do talk about this topic and when I do talk about our industry is there's a little bit of a lifestyle to it. If you're going to be in this industry, that if you're looking for that, I want to go to work at 8 and come home at 5, and then I can put it on the shelf and not think about it again to the next day. That's not been my experience. Now some of my co-panelists here may disagree, but in my experience, especially the higher you go, when you take on those higher level management duties, I'm associate director now, for example, 8 to 5 is just not my reality. There is a lot of being on conference calls, a lot of collaboration, a lot of overseeing different parts of your projects or what your team or your direct reports are working on. But that 8 to 5 approach, it just doesn't tend to exist that often in this industry. And if you start out that way, chances are the higher you go, you're going to lose that.
Yeah, I'll say, you know, I've worked for both the CRO as well as pharma. I've always worked doing RFPs, clinical contracts, finance. So I did the whole circle from the financial analysis all the way to doing contracts, forecasting, budgeting, and then bids and proposals. So my day-to-day through all those positions really entails being collaborative. You have to keep an open mind to change. And a lot of times people don't want to be open-minded, but things in this industry continually change. So you have to collaborate with your team members. And myself, I have a healthcare administration degree with an emphasis of finance, so I am non-clinical. So there was a huge learning curve. Still to this day, I'm continuously learning. So in this industry, I find you have to be continuously learning and wanting to develop yourself. I spend a lot of time behind the computer, and I do agree with Reggie. It is definitely not clock in, clock out, 8-hour days. That just, you might when you're entry level, you might get away with that, but you're really not going to excel in your career if you want to just clock in and clock out. After work, I would read research articles, learn about clinical trial, learn about different study drugs that are coming out. So if you're a learner, you like being collaborative, working with different executives, working with legal teams, then you could go and look in a pharma for like some kind of titles like contracts manager or contracts analyst or project analyst, or bids and proposals analyst. Those are the type of job descriptions or titles that would fall into the category of what I just explained my day-to-day duties are. I hope that helps somebody.
I come from a much smaller organization. So we're about, I'm the medical director. We have an administrator who, I think we just saw a question, has really the project management and everything else, those kind of skills, contracts. And he's got an MBA and he runs this, and underneath him, we have a education director and a research director. And under the research director, there's actually 5 research coordinators. And research coordinator is kind of an opening job in this industry. And like you all have talked about when you work for CROs, we're an orthopedic surgery research organization. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. So everything's due in orthopedic surgery, but the biotechnology is really just starting to pick up in orthopedics. And there's been a few interesting discoveries that went on to clinical products, but not as many of the other areas. These kind of job openings are from all the way to the beginning, where you can be a research coordinator. You're just learning how to consent patients, just learning all the regulatory aspect of research, which there is a lot. And you have to be very curious. And I think every one of you are probably, if there's anything that's together with us, we're all curious. And you have to be curious of what's the regulation. You have to be curious of what's the science. You have to be curious of what kind of problems this patient have. As you get further along, that you're maybe not as much patient oriented, which our research coordinators are up with the research manager. She's not as much research oriented or patient oriented. But all of these little jobs that we have actually create so these skills you're talking about, and many of our hires go on to do other things. They've gone in clinical, PAs, nurse practitioners. So that has advanced their degree somewhat, and we do have or their career somewhat. And we do have an internship with UC Irvine where we do get people who help with the data analysis and the data input even, which meaning you're just on the computer, you're never seeing a patient. So the days are different. For me, I was in the clinic for 20 years. And so I pretty much manage most of the stuff either in the office or like we're doing right now at home. We do like to have meetings. And this is usually the way we do meetings sometimes. As you all know, there's lots of meetings in this kind of work also. Collaborative.
I think as my career has progressed, it's gotten to a point where no 2 days are ever the same. We're project-based and client-based. And so they are constantly shifting, new things to be learned, new fires to be fought. And maintaining that intellectual curiosity that Vance was referring to is critical to success. Finding out what needs to be done. It's very variable, lots of meetings, lots of Zoom now that we're all working remotely, and you know, transitioning from the task-oriented early stages of the career, where someone says, take care of this and report back when you're done, to the more strategic intellectual knowledge worker kind of thing, where you have to figure out for yourself what comes next.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. So one of the questions that came up that I also really liked was, what are your predictions for the industry in terms of hiring and skills in the era of COVID? What do you think the new normal, or I've even actually heard of it referred to as the new nimble, is going to be?
I say it's a wonderful field to get into. I do not see that there's going to be a loss of jobs. I foresee that, you know, there's an ample amount of opportunity for people, especially a lot of the CROs do already have infrastructure set for remote workforce. And now that some of the pharma, even like Gilead, they're allowing people to work from home. I've personally been in the industry for over 20 years, and I've worked from home for like the last 12 years. So I do see there's a lot of opportunity in the future. So my advice to candidates would be, and I share this with everybody I know, if you're looking for a job, whatever job board you're looking for, where it asks you what city to put in, don't put a city, put the word remote. Right now, due to COVID-19, the job, if you really want a job, put the word remote, because that means that company's hiring now, that they're actually offering opportunities for work from home.
That's great advice. It's actually something that came up on a presentation I did the other day, the idea of where are jobs going to be located in the future, because as we become more remote, you know, it doesn't matter if you're in my hometown of Evansville, Indiana, or in Irvine, where I live now, right? So fantastic. Anybody else have any thoughts on what the industry is going to look like in terms of hiring and skills in the post-COVID era?
Well, I will add on to what Ashley said from one standpoint. I agree with everything she said, and I'll give a shout out to Gilead, because they are definitely one of the companies that puts a lot of drugs on the market and a lot of good medication. Working from home has been a part of this industry since I started it. It's not new to us. When I do hear some biotech companies say now we need to convert to working from home, I'm kind of surprised about that notion, because it's kind of always been there. But I agree with what she said. It's remote. And also in that, don't even think just remote US. Think about other countries as well. There are a lot of other companies in a lot of different countries that are trying to do research in the US, or are doing research in other countries outside of their own, that are looking for talent around the world. So don't think just US, think globally when you're looking for opportunities in your applying. And to Vance's point earlier, entering as a study coordinator or something along that lines is a great idea too. I would encourage people from your first question, Brian, have somebody review your CV in the industry, because chances are you've already done something in college. If you were a part of a group, or if you worked in a certain organization, even at the college level, chances are you've already done some stuff that will resonate in terms of if we wanted to hire you for this industry. It might just take a seasoned person who knows the industry to look at your resume, ask you questions about it, and pull that information out and make it resonate when you apply for something.
Okay, great.
Orthopedic surgery, biotechnology is mostly, and will continue to probably be, related to medical devices. So if you can put a certain type of growth factor, angiogenic factor, or whatever, chondrogenic, or meaning cartilage producing protein, or bone producing protein with some other device, and get it into the body locally where it's needed, that's kind of like becoming the synergy between medical devices and pharmaceuticals. So we don't see many people in orthopedics for orthopedic problems taking medicines for their orthopedic problem by mouth. It's really being developed with the medical device industry, which is more complicated, but I think it will be the future.
Okay, all right. So obviously we've talked a lot about remote working, but one of this actually came up a number of times. And it's a discussion that we have had certainly at VitalLink, and that I've had with a number of business people, and also with students. You know, part of a new skill set is going to be able for someone to be able to work remotely. What remote working skills do you think are required right now?
Oh, let me give you a little insight there. I think people underestimate the power of big corporations or big industries right now to monitor your activity. So sometimes people get into the mindset, oh, I'm working from home. So that means I can have distractions. I can go for a jog. I can not have a childcare. Right now, COVID-19, there's a high level of tolerance for all of that. But after this has passed and there is childcare availability, there's zero tolerance. So they actually have Skype on our computers at every company that I've worked for. If it wasn't Skype, it was some other kind of chat app. And if you step away from your computer for more than 15 minutes, it goes idle. And so they can see and monitor that you are logged on and if you're working. And if you get a phone call, you must answer the phone calls appropriately, professionally. You must pretend like that is your office. So in order to succeed, post-COVID-19 era or pre-COVID-19 era, in working from home for corporations, you must be diligent in remembering that it is a job and you are going to have to complete all those duties as well as be accessible during that time. There will still be set hours, 8 to 5. Just because you work remote doesn't mean that you can't. And a lot of times you also have to learn to set boundaries for yourself, which I find that is the most challenging aspect of work from home, because your work is always at your home. So sometimes you might go eat dinner and then go, oh, I forgot that email, and then run back to the computer 2 hours later, 3 hours later, oh, great, now you worked a 12-hour day. So you really need to be able to prevent burnout, setting boundaries for yourself. And also you must be a very independent worker, which means if you need to collaborate with your manager and come up with tasks that you need to have done for that week, I would advise you post it in Excel, or I love Excel, or post it in a Post-it note somewhere in front of your computer that you know you have to get these things done that week and not get sidetracked. Because if you want to be able to be a remote from home employee and excel in your career or even keep your job, you have to be diligent to make sure you're accessible, your internet service provider is good, and you pay extra to make sure. You can't have excuses that internet wasn't there, electricity wasn't there. You have to have backup systems. So I will share my 5 backup systems I have. I have backup internet service, so I have two services, so I'm never not available. I have a backup generator, so if my system goes down with electricity, sometimes power outage, I'm available. I have 2 phones, my mobile phone and then the IP communicator on my computer. So there's never a time that anybody felt like they were disconnected from me. And then I schedule meetings with my teams so that they feel my presence. So you should always do that. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't usually do video. I just do phone calls.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, one of the things I would add is that although it does require that individual self-control and desire to keep at it, it is still a team collaborative workforce, and being able to collaborate and communicate across electronic means is really important, and staying connected with people. So it's not something where, especially in my role, being able to go off and just work on a task on a computer for 8 hours a day. It involves a lot of communication, a lot of collaboration, and leveraging the technical platforms to do that is a big skill.
Okay. So real quick, one question that just came through that is relevant to this, so I thought I would throw it out there, was what are some good time management tips when working from home, and how do you balance that heavy workload? I know you just mentioned, Justin, some of the remote technologies. Those can be very helpful. Any other thoughts on time management or ways we can do this?
Absolutely. The to-do lists, setting aside time on the calendar. These tasks, if unscheduled, can end up taking the whole day. The time can be very unstructured, and setting a time limit and saying, okay, I'm going to take care of this thing for half an hour. By the end of the half an hour, it's done. Time to move on to the next thing, and not let these things suck up your whole day.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add, just because what Justin said is imperative about communication. So if you find that you just feel overwhelmed and you have all of that stuff to do, it's best to be communicating with the management team and letting them know you have these 10 items on your to-do list and you don't feel like you can complete them, and then ask which ones are priority. When would you like one to get done? Because it's better to keep communication open and receive feedback from your team to assess what's priority, because you're not going to get everything done. It's just not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my day. I'm sure it's all of yours as well.
I think another skill set that people should kind of work on developing, especially for this industry, and it would resonate with others too, is the ability to manage a meeting, to develop a meeting agenda. What I find in this industry, and especially the more collaborators you have and the more people you have on your teams, the worse it gets, is everybody wants to have a meeting about something, and then the meetings pile up and the meetings pile up. And then what you end up having is a situation where you met so much that you didn't have time to work on the stuff you met about. There are a few times that I go into meetings, even when I'm leading the meeting, that I don't walk away with action items that I got to do after the fact. And what you don't want is to have meetings that you've done, executed, had all the people at the table and talked, and then leave away from the table thinking, okay, there were several issues that we didn't get to in that meeting. The development of a meeting agenda, the officiating of a meeting, if you will, making sure that you cover everything, you get it all covered, that is essential to making sure that you manage your time well. Because when meetings drift and they go too long and you don't get to the work, then guess what? You're working late at night, waking up early in the morning, trying to compensate for the fact that you didn't get everything done in that meeting. Then you got to schedule another meeting. So that's one of the skill sets that I think people need to work on as well. And it'll resonate in everything you do.
Sure. Great. So one question that came up, and this is probably taking us back to the very beginning. And I want to address it now before we get too much further along. Could you give a basic summary of what biotechnology is and what your purpose is in the field for each of you individually? And perhaps that's something we should have covered off the top. So I'm glad that came up as a question. Reggie, since you're up there, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. So more or less, biotechnology is using biologics to treat different conditions. I mean, that's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
Whereas the difference on pharma is you've made drugs, maybe they're not naturally occurring biologics, or they have chemical components that you've modified or something like that to treat conditions. And then medical devices are medical devices to treat whatever you're doing or to aid in whatever you're doing. That's my synopsis of it. My role in clinical operations, the way I describe this to people who really don't know what we do, is you have a lot of people in a car. Somebody has to drive that car. Clinical operations tends to be, in most industries, in most companies, the people who oversee the whole umbrella. We don't have to be knowledgeable and specialized in every part of it. For example, data management, clinical supply, regulatory, the people that get us approved to go into certain countries and do research. We don't have to be the SME, the subject matter expert in everything, but we have to be knowledgeable about everything because we're responsible for a lot of it. So that's my role, clinical operations. Okay. And do you want to tell us real quickly what your company does? So I work for a company that's focused on treating oncology, so cancers, various different types of cancers. This company specifically, for example, uses a commonly known virus to treat solid tumors. Okay. All right. Fantastic.
I think Reggie definitely gave the oversight of biotech, but from my perspective, the PSC Biotech is a life science consulting group. We work with clients throughout the biotech space, and our primary function is to help biotech companies bring their manufacturing facilities into operation through commissioning, qualification, validation. So when a biotech company has a new drug, for instance, and they want to, or a new product, and they want to manufacture it at scale, they would work with us to ensure that the facility that they're going to manufacture it in is compliant to federal regulations, so that the drug product is reproducible and within guidelines.
Okay. Ashley?
I think they did the definition justice. I have nothing to do with that. Gilead Sciences, it's an exciting time for our company in the sense that right now with COVID-19, we have remdesivir and it has been marketed and going through clinical trials. So we're excited about its potential to continuously benefit the patients. And we're even right now working on a clinical trial to make an inhaler so that will go directly to the lungs and help patients. So very exciting times. And then we also do drugs that help with HIV and hepatitis. So, but from my perspective, where I work in is I work with clinical operations and I liaison with all the teams, ex-US and US, in order to collaborate and make sure that the contracts are in place so that the clinical trials can be conducted and that the budgets are aligned. And I'm the assistant to all of the teams. So that's what my perspective of it. I feel like it's nice to be part of clinical research and feel like you're doing good in the world by helping patients. So our company and in my perspective and clinical research in general and pharma and biotech, it's all about the patients. All about the patients.
All right, wonderful.
Yeah, I was in spine surgeon until 20 years ago, and the first biologic, and that, to my knowledge, is really the manufacturing process of kind of creating something, usually a protein or peptide, using biological resources versus a chemical or organic chemistry reaction like pharma. And those large proteins, they have a hard time trying to get into the body. That's number one. And in orthopedics, the best biologic that came was about the end of my career in spine surgery. It was called bone morphogenic protein. It was actually created to increase bone formation for fractures and other reasons why we need bone. And it revolutionized bone healing. So that was huge 20 years ago. It has to be put exactly where it needs to be, which I was talking about, either in a medical device or using a medical device to put it there. I've also had experience developing an angiogenic factor, which is another protein that creates new blood vessels. Again, that has to be put somewhere. Even this was in cardiac, so I worked in cardiac. So now I'm back in orthopedics, and I'm seeing the biologics that have actually started in other areas, like I'm talking about, and it seems like you're all in different areas coming into orthopedics. And I think that ability to put a biologic, like Reggie was talking about, molecule that has a specific mechanism to either make cartilage, to make bone in orthopedics, even make muscle, will be greater and greater. And so that's a lot different than taking a pill that was designed for some other problem that we have in the body. So biologics, I think, is really helping the surgical practice and will continue to help the surgical practice.
Okay, wonderful.
Brian, if I may, I want to
yeah, please,
because I think we've kind of talked a little bit, like, for example, Gilead, and I'll go to Gilead again, my company, Oncolytics, and I'm guessing Oncotherapeutics, Orthotherapeutics. These are sponsor companies. So then below that, you have what we call vendors or service providers or collaborating organizations. And so I should say in clinical research, there's a lot that happens in clinical research. So if you're looking at this industry, look at it from the standpoint of the sponsor companies tend to make the product, they develop the product, they don't always do it in a vacuum, we collaborate with each other a lot of times, but that's where your product at a high level comes from. And then you have collaborating companies, and they could be everything from companies that do translations of documents that you're going to use in other countries. It could be people who help you make the drug or get it into a country. It could be clinical research organizations that support the facilitation of the drug. or the clinical trial rather. They could be so many different companies, technology companies that come in and say, hey, Gilead or Oncolytics, I got this new technology you can use on, to organize your structure inside your clinical trial, make it work more effective and more efficient. It doesn't necessarily mean, what I'm getting at is it doesn't necessarily mean you have to deal with the medical components of doing a clinical trial to be in this industry. Because there are a lot of different functions in getting a clinical trial off the ground and getting a drug to the market. So I encourage people to look at the industry and then investigate on their own. Look on LinkedIn and see who's in this industry and what companies they work for and what services they provide. Look at websites, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have working knowledge of drugs and devices and so forth to be in this industry. There are people that work in data management, for example, who have no clue what the molecular structure of a drug is, and we need them. So keep that in mind.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Actually, I think, Reggie, you had talked a little bit earlier about mentorship, and one of the questions that came up a number of times from our participants was, how do I network and find mentors in the field?
LinkedIn is a good way to do it.
Okay.
And I encourage LinkedIn again. I don't work for LinkedIn, let me say that, but I encourage it because when people put their profiles up there, here's what you see. You see, obviously, the name of the person. If they filled out their profile, you can see the degrees they have to get to their job. If they posted the certifications that they've gone and gotten along the way, you can see the certifications that they've gotten. And then you have the ability, if they, to reach out to them and just say, hey, I'm interested in the industry. Can I ask you certain questions? You have the opportunity to get feedback on them. What is it like for you? Kind of like what we're doing here, where you asked us, what does our day look like? You can ask people before you even go to a certain company. What is the environment at the company like? What is your role in the company? A lot of us, and I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but a lot of us are willing to answer those quick questions if we have the time to just give you a little feedback. And then some of us take that extra step and become mentors. If you're at an academic institution, and especially some like UCSF in San Francisco, for example, where they're tied to a hospital. There are a lot of institutions like that. Then you have a lot of resources right there next to you. Speak to some of the doctors that are doing the research. I encourage people also look at clinicaltrials.gov and see one of the questions that came through the chat was, how do you keep up with the industry? Look at clinicaltrials.gov and see some of the clinical trials that are going on in the country, just to see where people's mind frames are going in terms of the research that they're trying to do. That's another way to keep up with the industry.
Wonderful. Justin, you look like you were going to take this one on too.
Sure, yeah. My recommendation, and it's one that I follow, is to get involved with industry trade organizations. That's where all the people that you want to know are. They're involved in those things. They're going to meetings. They're participating in networking events, and they're talking about what's going on in the industry. So they have a technical aspect to them. They have a networking aspect to it and a social aspect to it.
Well, thank you. And I can certainly attest to the importance of networking. That's how Ashley and I met. We met because one of my board members invited me in to speak to an organization that she's a part of, and then she reached out and said, hey, I love what you're doing. I'd love to get together. And so she and I started talking, and voila, here she is on one of our panels. She's actually introduced us to a number of people who are on the panels, and it really is important. And I can say one of the things that I recommend to students that I teach is don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to reach out. And I think Reggie mentioned this as well, but do it judiciously and do it in a smart way. Any other thoughts on networking and mentors from anyone?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'd like to throw some resources out there for people. Try to look at the Association of Clinical Research Professionals. And then for women, there's a Healthcare Business Association, and I'm part of that. And in that group, not only do you have industry professionals from clinical research, but you also have from healthcare administration perspective, from hospital perspective. So you have everybody under the umbrella of anything healthcare related. So it actually exposes you to much more opportunities, not just clinical research, all kinds of other opportunities.
Okay, wonderful. So we're getting toward the end, but I did have another question that came up, and that comes up on a lot of a lot, and it's not necessarily specific to biotech, but what about non-technical skills? You know, we hear, I've heard one of the most I guess common questions that I hear from hiring managers is, you know, why aren't colleges teaching the soft skills? You know, students, you know, we have people who come to us, they have the knowledge, but they're missing out on some of these hireability, employability, or soft skills. You know, what are the soft skills? What are the employability skills, if you will, for the biotech industry that students need to be concerned with?
Well, I'll take one on that, and I think in biotechnology or in clinical research as a whole, sometimes companies fail at this. We have people who come in a role as an independent contributor, and they do a great job. Yeah, they're part of a team, but their tasks tend to be more of the independent contributor type, and they do well at that for a year, 2 year, 3 years, and then we decide we want to promote them to a management level role, and then we want to give that independent contributor direct reports, where now they're not only responsible for the job they do, they're responsible for other people's development, other people's growth, and their progression. And then some people fail at that because that's not a natural part of who they are or what they wanted to take on. I think if you find that you're an open-minded person, and this is getting to the soft skills, if you find that you're an open-minded person, that you're the person who's willing to invest in other people, willing to reach out and collaborate. And here's a really, really important one. Willing to take constructive criticism. Doesn't mean you have to change everything about yourself, but you're willing to at least hear another viewpoint and take it home and think about it. Maybe I can do something a little bit differently. And willing to take on being a more or less a spontaneous person that says, hey, there's an opportunity for me to do something to better the team or to better the project. Let me get my hands on that and take that initiative, as opposed to waiting on somebody to have to tell you to do it. You know, if you think like that, then those are some soft skills that I think you can express in an interview, that you can pinpoint and give examples of how you've been that person, where you're willing to pick up where somebody else left off without having been told, where you're willing to collaborate, where you're willing to say, I'm willing to reach across the aisle and work with somebody and take a lead on something and support other people as well. Those things resonate in an interview, and they're very important in this industry.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I know Reggie had mentioned earlier, you know, combing through LinkedIn and looking at what certificates or certifications. So what are some certificates or certifications that are common or, you know, that students should consider?
I would give this one to Ashley. I won't take it from her. She mentioned that.
Yeah, I sent a link out to everybody. It's called acrpnet.org. And you can go on that website, and then you could see different certifications that you can get for, like, clinical research associate or research coordinator. And these are certifications that can get you into some of the jobs that Reggie has actually done. So if he wants to chime in, I think he might be a better fit. I just had the link.
Well, I did start out with the ACRP certification as a clinical research associate. They've now expanded their scope to just their certifications for principal investigators. I believe they have just a general certification now for a clinical research professional. I would encourage looking at the website. Another organization is SOCRA, SOCRA, which I believe stands for Society of Clinical Research Associates or something like that. I forget. Anyway, so SOCRA is another one. Another certification I really encourage people to get is a project management certification. So there's an organization called Project Management Institute that gives it. And then there's several different organizations that'll give you the training for it. But that's a really good one to get. They're kind of hard to get. They're very difficult to get. Studying for that exam and passing it really is based on understanding the way the questions are asked. But I think it helps a little bit in terms of getting into the industry as well. Doesn't mean you're going to be a great project manager, but there are definitely concepts within that the training and then getting the certification that you will employ in this industry, at least from the clinical operations standpoint.
Okay.
I would just quickly point towards ASQ. They do a lot of different certifications that can be beneficial in a variety of areas as well.
Wonderful.
And they're not quite as onerous as the PMP, which I agree is a bear.
Yeah, I've never taken it, but I've heard from someone who it took her 3 times to pass it. So, so real quick, are there opportunities for mentoring in your companies for new employees, and are these virtual? Is anybody, you know, offering up those opportunities right now?
Always.
Okay.
The responsibility is always on the mentee, though.
Yes, it is. Yeah, you have to take charge, right? Okay. Anybody else have any last thoughts, parting words before we move on to a quick presentation by Santa Ana College?
The only thing I would say, there was a question that came through the chat. How different is biotechnology for humans and animals?
Yes.
I cannot answer that question. Maybe my colleagues can.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I've only done phase 1 to phase 4. So phase 1's when it's on healthy subjects, healthy volunteers. So I haven't done preclinical, so I have no.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other, you know, kind of broad overview topics or thoughts or anything for our students?
The only other thing that I would say about this industry is, and I think it's important for people, there are some jobs where people want that instant fulfillment. I think, for example, I have a lot of medical professionals in my family, nurses, one doctor, a lot of religious people. School teachers, for example, in my experience, the friends I have that are school teachers, they go to school, they see that bright light come on in the students' eyes, they go home that day or that week and they feel like they accomplished something. And I think that's great. I think we need it. But in this industry, some of these clinical trials will go on 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And you may put in all of that time and your trial may fail. Your drug or your product doesn't go to market. And you pretty much done that job and you didn't get the end result that you hoped. If you're not one of those people that can accept that, then, you know, maybe this might not be the industry, just because we don't always get that instant gratification. Sometimes we don't get gratification at all. I'll go back to Gilead. When I worked there, they got a lot of drugs on the market. They win a lot. They do good work. They win a lot. But there are companies that open up and they never win. So you got to keep that in mind. You may put in 5, 10, 15 years of work and never put a product on the market in this industry. But there's also victory in that because you didn't put bad products on the market.
Sure.
Keep that in mind.
Okay, wonderful. Anything else? All right, well then, thank you very much to our panelists. We really appreciate your time. A lot of amazing insight. I know I took a lot of notes, and so thank you very much for participating. We're going to switch over right now to Santa Ana College and have a quick presentation from them on their biotech program. So thank you, panelists. If you will turn off your cameras now, and we will switch over to John A. Is John A. with us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what I would like to do right now is just turn it over to John A. Varela from Santa Ana College. She is going to talk about their biotech program. John A., it's all you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I am the internship coordinator for our biotech program at Santa Ana College. And so I'm going to be here to discuss a little bit about our program. So we're located at Santa Ana College, and we have a certificate that you can do that's only 3 classes. So the first class, which is the Biotech Lab Assistant Certificate, you'd only need to take 3 classes in order to fulfill that. And you learn all of the primary and fundamental skills needed in order for you to be successful in a lab. Not only that, you can gain other certificates that teach you other techniques, and they're a little bit more in depth. So you can go to Biomanufacturing Technician Certificate, the Lab Technician Certificate, or you can get the Quality Control and Quality Assurance Microbiology Technician Certificate. And all of these are really great for you to have if you're interested in getting that experience in the lab. So if you're thinking of the biotech industry, if you're even pre-med, if you're thinking about medical devices as well, any of these certificates would be a really great addition for your resume and just for you personally to have those skills. Not only that, we have a direct pathway from our college, Santa Ana College. So you would do 2 years at Santa Ana College for our biotech program, and then you can transfer to Miracosta College, which is down in San Diego County, north of Escondido. It's actually in Encinitas. So that college is a community college as well, but they actually have a biotech program, and you can receive your bachelor's degree there. And the benefit of that is of how inexpensive it is. So in order to receive your bachelor's degree from Miracosta and graduate, the total cost would be less than $10,000. And if you equate that to the UC or Cal State, you're saving quite a bit of money. And then after that, after you get your bachelor's, you can go and get a master's degree. You can go work in the industry. There's a lot of student services and resources that we provide for you, not only at our biotech program, but at Miracosta as well. We provide resume and cover letter help. We help you with interviewing. We have different connections and partnerships with local biotech companies in Orange County. So we would be able to help you with all of that. So if you're really interested in getting hands-on experience in the lab and getting a certificate and being able to showcase your skills to those industries and being able to actually have the skills to feel comfortable in the lab, that first certificate is really easy for you guys to obtain. Even while in high school, you can do dual enrollment classes and get the classes for free. And those courses are taught throughout the year. So you can always contact me down at the information down at the bottom left corner. You can see my information, Joni Varela, and my email, and I'd be more than happy to help you. And our director, Dr. Takahashi, could also help you as well. Her information is down at the bottom. We also have an Instagram page, so please feel free to contact us on our Instagram page and direct messages on there if you have any questions. We try to update it as often as possible about our program, what's going on, what we're doing, and some different labs and different techniques that we're going over that week. And we also have a website if you have more questions about the classes, and we can always assist you with that as well. So please feel free to email me if you have any questions, or Dr. Takahashi. We'd be more than happy to have you guys join our program.